All right, so this video is going to be a quick explanation of order of operations and evaluating expressions in algebra. First thing is to focus on this PEMDAS, which stands for Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally, which really stands for parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, adding, subtracting. You always look to simplify inside parentheses first, then you do exponents, and then multiply and divide. Technically, it's written in that order just so it sounds nice, but really you do whichever one of those two goes first, left to right. So if you only have a multiplication and division part in a problem, you would always do whichever is furthest left. The same thing goes for adding and subtracting. So if you have only adding and subtracting in a problem, you would do whichever one of those is further left. So if we look at this first problem, we have subtraction here, we have multiplication. So what we want to do first, based on PEMDAS, is you multiply first. Now technically that's a -3. I know if we covered up this 6, it looks like a -3. Right now it looks like a -3. They're the same thing. So you really still have the 6 here, and then -15, because -3 times 5 is -15, and 6 minus 15 is -9. So multiplication came first, then subtraction. Now we actually have parentheses. So the P parentheses means do stuff inside the parentheses. Everything else stays the same, but 5 minus 8 is -3. Now after parentheses, even though this problem still has parentheses, it's not. There's nothing to do inside of them. Now we have both exponents and multiplication. Multiplication is not the first thing here, it's exponents. So -3 squared means -3 times -3, which is +9. Still in parentheses because you're going to multiply 2 times 9, which gives you 18. Going along here, we got exponents. Be careful. The being in parentheses versus not being in parentheses does matter. This technically means 2 squared, which is 4, but then make it negative. Minus 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2, which is actually 8. Plus, and then -2 times -2 times -2 is really a -8, because 3 negatives make a negative, and 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And when you combine these, subtraction, you get -12 plus a -8, which means -8, and then you get -20. Here we have multiplication, division, adding, subtracting. So multiplying and dividing comes first, but between those two, you see that division really comes first because it's further left. So what you're going to do is you're going to divide first, which is 8, then multiply by 2, and eventually do this stuff later. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 minus 7 plus 8. I know it says adding then subtracting, but it's left to right again. So you do 16 minus 7, and you get your final answer. Over here we have a fraction, which really just means do the top first, then do the bottom next, and then figure out what you get and simplify. So if you just look at the top, what we have is parentheses first. So this is really -2 times 6, which is -12. And on the bottom, this is really 1 minus 5 squared, which is 25, and 1 minus 25 is -24. And then lastly, if you have two negatives, a negative divided by or a negative times a negative, either way, is a positive answer. So your answer will be positive, no negatives anymore. And you got to reduce the fraction, meaning divide by what they both have in common. The biggest number they both have in common is 12. When you divide by 12, you get 1/2. That's simplifying or reducing fractions. Here, these brackets here actually are basically parentheses or grouping symbols, which act the same as parentheses. So you do have to look inside here first. This is still 18 minus 2 times essentially what we get inside here. Inside, we have multiplication and we have addition, but you have to do multiplication first. So what you get is 5 plus 6. Now you can do the parentheses adding. 18 minus 2 stays. 5 plus 6 is 11. Now we have subtraction and multiplication, but the multiplication comes first, and you get -4. Here, same thing, top, you do parentheses, you get -4, but in parentheses squared, this is where the parentheses matter. -4 squared in parentheses really does mean -4 times -4, which is +16, and it's going to be over whatever this answer is. We can move this up so you see where this came from. This was the top part. The bottom part is 6 minus 4 times 3, but it's 4 times 3 is actually 12. And 6 minus 12 is -6, so that's what goes on the bottom. And then what you can do is you could reduce that fraction. These both divide by 2. to give you 8 over 3. It's still negative. You could put the negative up top. You could put the negative on the bottom, or you could put the negative in front, but it can't go in both places. So I generally like to put it kind of out in the front, but as long as you have a negative there somewhere, you are good. Here's another one where you got to kind of think of the order here. Division and multiplication are first to do, but since division is first, left to right, you have to do that first. When you do 32 divided by 8, you get 4. Still keeping all the other things together. Now multiplication comes next. Be careful with negatives. And then even though adding again is said to first in PEMDAS, it really is left to right, which is -8 with the subtraction first, then adding. Last one here, this one looks a lot, but really you just kind of do inside here, and inside there you really got to do this first. So everything else is going to stay the same, except this turns into -1. I know -1 to the 6th power sounds scary when you do exponents here next, but -1 times itself a bunch of times. It doesn't matter how many times you multiply 1 by itself. 1 times 1 times 1 a billion times is still going to be 1. The only question if it's positive or negative. And since we have an even number of negatives, that will be a positive number. Everything else stays the same. And now still doing it inside the brackets here is multiplication. So 6 times 3 times 1 is that. And then if you subtract still inside the parentheses or brackets, you get 3. And then finally, -2 times 3 is -6. All right, this last little section here is evaluating expressions, which is basically a half step away from an order of operation problem. Essentially what we're telling you is plug that number in for the given letter. So anytime you see an X in this case, you're going to plug in 4, but make sure you're plugging it inside of parentheses so that you don't make any algebra mistakes. Order of operations now applies. Here's parentheses, so we're going to do that first. Everything else stays the same. Now our next order of operation is exponents, so we'll do that next. We don't multiply 2 times 4, so be careful there. And then now we have 2 different multiplications. This is 32 here. This is a -6. When you combine them, you get 26. All right, so down the line, same thing. Instead of X, you plug in -2. Again, in parentheses, be careful. You are going to do exponents first here, not the multiplication. So this is a +4. Remember, that's 2 negatives. And then this is also 2 negatives here, right? So when I write this out, we have only 1 negative here, so this is going to be -12. We have 2 negatives here, so this becomes +6, and you get -6. All right, so you can kind of see here, same thing. Instead of X, plug in the numbers that you're supposed to do. 10 times 3 plus 3. In here we have multiplication, then we'll have subtraction. Again, just going by the order of operations. This becomes 30, this becomes +15. You add them, you get 45. This one has 2 different letters, but same thing. So instead of Y, you're going to plug in 4. Minus, instead of X, -2. On the bottom, same thing. Notice again in parentheses all day long. On top, you got parentheses first. Careful, minus a negative means plus, so that's really 6 squared, which is 36. And on the bottom, you multiply every single one of those numbers together. So there's only 1 negative there, so it will be negative. 2 times 2 is 4, times 4 is 16. And then these can both divide by 4 is the biggest number. You get 9 over -4, which again, I like to kind of write it just out in front. But if you wrote it like this, that would not be wrong. And last but not least, again, this is kind of just a quick video explaining this is not meant to be like the full understanding. Ideally, you've done some stuff already in class. Maybe you've missed class. You could always ask questions, get help. Again, it gets a little tricky with all these parentheses, but we're just plugging the numbers in the right spots. We've got a bunch of parentheses stuff to do here. So this is -3 times, this is -2 plus 4 plus 10. I'm going to do exponents here at the same time too. That's a +1. In here, parentheses, you could do -3 times 2 plus 10 times 1 Negative 6 plus 10 equals 4. Okay, I hope that helps. Obviously, if you have questions, you can always reach out. But that's a little quick explanation on order of operations and evaluating expressions.